Have you ever wondered what it takes to be called the purest woman in all of history? What kind of life could earn such a sacred title that it echoes through the ages and touches the hearts of billions? Today, we're going to uncover the extraordinary story of a woman whose name has been whispered in prayers for over 14 centuries, whose faith was so unshakable it moved mountains, and whose devotion was so profound that heaven itself bore witness to her righteousness. This is the story of Maryam, known in the Christian tradition as Mary. But her tale goes far deeper than what most people know. Her story isn't just about miracles and divine encounters, though those certainly happened. It's about a young woman who faced impossible circumstances with unwavering trust, who endured trials that would break most souls, and who became the vessel through which one of the greatest prophets in human history would enter the world. But here's what might surprise you. Before Maryam was chosen for this incredible destiny, before angels appeared to her with messages that would change everything, she was already living a life of such purity and devotion that it set her apart from every other woman of her time. The question is, what made her so special? What was it about this young woman that caught the attention of the Almighty? If you're ready to discover the truth about the most honored woman in Islamic history, comment 777 below, and let's embark on this sacred journey together. Trust me, what you're about to learn will not only inspire you, but might just transform how you see faith, motherhood, and the power of complete surrender to God's will. The story begins not with Maryam herself, but with a prayer so desperate and sincere that it pierced the heavens. In the blessed city of Jerusalem, there lived a woman named Hannah, whose heart ached with a longing that consumed her every waking moment. She was childless, and in a society where a woman's worth was often measured by her ability to bear children, this was not just personal sorrow, but public shame. Hannah was married to Imran, a righteous man from the lineage of prophets, but despite their prayers and their pure intentions, no child had been granted to them. Year after year passed, and Hannah watched as other women carried babies in their arms while her own arms remained empty. The pain cut so deep that it drove her to make a vow that would echo through eternity. Standing in the sacred precincts of the temple, with tears streaming down her face, Hannah raised her hands to the sky and made a promise that would change the course of history. She vowed that if God blessed her with a child, she would dedicate that child entirely to His service. Not just for a few years, not just until marriage, but for life. This child would belong completely to God, serving in the temple, devoted to worship and prayer. Can you imagine the faith it took to make such a vow? Hannah wasn't just asking for a child. She was offering to give that child back to God before it was even conceived. This wasn't desperation speaking. This was the purest form of surrender, a heart so aligned with divine will that personal desire became secondary to spiritual purpose. And then something miraculous happened. God heard Hannah's prayer, and in His infinite mercy, He granted her request. But as with all divine gifts, this blessing came with a surprise that would test her faith even further. When Hannah discovered she was carrying a child, her joy knew no bounds. She had waited so long, prayed so fervently, and now her prayers were finally answered. But when the time came for the birth, Hannah delivered not the son she had expected, but a daughter. In that moment, a lesser woman might have questioned God's wisdom or felt disappointed. After all, in her society, it was typically sons who served in the temple, sons who carried on the family name, sons who were seen as the greater blessing. Hannah, however, demonstrated the kind of faith that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Instead of disappointment, she felt gratitude. Instead of questioning, she accepted. She looked at her beautiful daughter and recognized that God's plans are always perfect, even when they don't match our expectations. She named her daughter Maryam, and true to her vow, she prepared to dedicate this precious child to God's service. But presenting a female child to serve in the temple was unprecedented. The religious leaders didn't know what to make of this situation. How could a young girl fulfill the kind of service that was typically reserved for men? It was then that something extraordinary occurred. something that signaled from the very beginning that this child was unlike any other. The learned men of the temple, the scholars and the priests, found themselves in a dilemma. Who among them would take responsibility for raising and teaching this special child? The answer came in a way that left no doubt about divine intervention. They decided to cast lots, a method of seeking God's guidance in difficult decisions. Each man who was willing to take on this responsibility would place his name in the selection, and God would choose through this sacred process. But what happened next revealed just how special Maryam truly was, and it would mark the beginning of a life so extraordinary that it would inspire believers for generations to come. When the lots were cast, something miraculous unfolded before the astonished eyes of all who witnessed it. As each piece of wood bearing a name was thrown into the flowing river, they sank beneath the surface as expected. But when Zakariya's name entered the water, it defied the very laws of nature itself. His lot floated, remaining on the surface while all others disappeared into the depths below. This was no coincidence, no trick of current or chance. This was a clear sign from the heavens that Zakariya, himself a prophet of God and a man of unparalleled righteousness, had been chosen to care for this extraordinary child. The other men stood in stunned silence, recognizing that they had just witnessed divine selection in its purest form. But who was Zakariya, and why was he the chosen guardian for young Maryam? Zakariya was not just any religious leader. He was a prophet, a man who spoke directly with God, whose heart was so pure and whose devotion so complete that heaven trusted him with its most precious secrets. He was also, remarkably, married to Hannah's sister, making him Maryam's uncle. Even in this divine appointment, we see God's wisdom in choosing family to care for family, love to nurture love. From the moment Zakariya took responsibility for Maryam, it became clear that this child was surrounded by blessings that defied explanation. He prepared a special chamber for her in the temple, a private sanctuary where she could worship, pray, and grow in spiritual knowledge, away from the distractions of the world. This wasn't just a room. It was a sacred space where heaven and earth seemed to meet. What happened in that chamber would become the stuff of legend, witnessed by Zakariya himself and recorded for all time as proof of Maryam's extraordinary spiritual status. Every time Zakariya entered her sanctuary, he found something that left him speechless with wonder. There, arranged beautifully before her, would be fresh fruits and provisions that had no earthly explanation for their presence. Picture this scene. In the depths of winter, when no trees bore fruit and the markets were empty of fresh produce, Zakariya would find summer fruits in Maryam's chamber. In the scorching heat of summer, when certain fruits were completely out of season, he would discover winter provisions that were impossible to obtain. These weren't just any fruits either, but the most perfect, most beautiful specimens he had ever seen. The first time this happened, Zakariya was so shocked he could barely speak. He approached young Maryam, his voice filled with amazement, and asked her the question that would reveal the depth of her relationship with the divine. "Oh, Maryam," he said, "from where is this?" Her answer was simple, profound, and earth-shattering in its implications. "It is from Allah," she replied without hesitation, her young voice carrying a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. "Indeed, Allah provides for whom He wills without account." These weren't the words of a child reciting something she had learned. These were the words of someone who had experienced firsthand the boundless generosity of the Creator, someone whose faith was so pure that miracles were simply part of her daily reality. Maryam's story teaches us that true greatness isn't found in worldly achievements, but in complete surrender to the divine will. From Hannah's desperate prayer to the miraculous provisions in the temple chamber, we witness a lineage of unwavering faith that shaped the purest woman in history. Her life reminds us that when we align our hearts with God's purpose, even the impossible becomes possible. What aspect of Maryam's journey resonates most deeply with your own spiritual path? Share your thoughts below.